Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. Well, predicting a V-shaped economic recovery, the Central Bank of India has said that if growth momentum continues and inflation stays mild, then there will be a room for policy action to support growth. This observation came in the State of the Economy report released by the Reserve Bank of India. This comes at a time when the top banks started draining out the surplus liquidity in the money markets to stave off an economic crisis as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The consumer confidence is expected to increase from January 2021, peak in July 2021 and continue till September, said the report. Meanwhile, investors took some profit off the table on Friday after markets scaled historic levels a day before when the BSE Sensex surpassed the 50,000 mark for the first time. Sensex ended near the day's low at 48,878.54, down 746 points, dragged by Reliance, ICICI and the HDFC twins. Bajaj Auto remained the best performer through the day. In this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the V-shaped recovery and the Sensex breaching the 50,000 mark. Joining me on the program today are Professor Charan Singh, CEO, eGrow Foundation, Nilesh Shah, Managing Director, Kotak Mahindra Asset Management Company Limited, and Jayan Das Gupta, former Secretary, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Shah, let me begin the program with you first. First, let's analyze the bull run of the Sensex breaching the 50,000 mark for the very first time on Thursday. What are the factors behind that?
So, I am reminded of an old Hindi movie song, अनहोनी को होनी कर दे, होनी को अनहोनी, एक जगह पे जमा हो तीनों, अमर, Akbar, Anthony. This unholy in stock market has happened because of flows, sentiments and fundamentals. Between FPI and retail investors in calendar year 2020, we saw $50 billion buying, highest ever. Month-on-month improving economic activity boosted sentiment, and most importantly, quarterly results which are coming are way beyond street's expectation. For the September 20 quarter, India Inc. posted its highest ever quarterly profit of 110,000 crore for Nifty 50 companies. This December quarter, so far results which have come, they are even above September quarter level. This profitability growth of India Inc. in COVID-19 environment is primarily the reason why stock markets have rebounded.
So talking about that, of course, on Friday we saw after the historic highs on Thursday that the markets closed almost 750 points lower, the following day. What could be the reason behind that? And also, can we see the Sensex or the stock markets being consistently over the 50,000 mark in the days to come?
So it's always difficult to predict short-term movement of the market. There is medical situation in rest of the world, including in China nowadays. There is budget which is on the annual on 1st of Feb. So markets will continue to move up and down. But if the quarterly profit run rate which we saw in September quarter continues, then certainly there are good days for the market.
Absolutely. Okay, talking about good days, Mr. Das Gupta, let me bring you into the picture now. The RBI also is suggesting that there are good days ahead as far as the economy is concerned, and we are likely to see a V-shaped recovery. What are the factors that are going to contribute towards this?
The first thing which comes to mind is that agriculture has done very well. The Kharif production, for instance, last year has been about 6% more than the previous year's production. So that is a very good augury for things to come, because it affects the sentiment of the investors. The second thing is, if you take indices like the Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing, it is higher than that of December, and it is much higher than December 2019. Similarly, for services, the Purchasing Managers Index is showing an upward trend. The third thing is that bank credit, after remaining below the 6% mark, has now gone above the 6% mark. So there is a demand for bank credit. The next point is that the consumer sentiments, which have also been, there is an index for that, that is showing an uptick. And if you remember, the private final consumption expenditure in India accounts for more than 60% of the GDP. So that is, again, a very good sign. And the final thing is that the government's expenditure, especially the capital expenditure and the transfers to the states for capital expenditure, that has gone up. Similarly, the offtake of the M-Narega scheme, that has also been very good, and that is putting money in the pockets of people who are going to spend more. In fact, if the recent reports are to be seen, about 130% of the original budgeted amount has already been spent on M-Narega. The last point is that if you just track the unemployment figures from the beginning of January 2021, we will find that from 9%, it has now come down to about 7%, 7.2% in the rural areas and 7.7% in the urban areas. So unemployment is showing that it is coming down. So more and more people are getting employed. So that will mean that money is circulating. People are having greater capacity to spend. So all these things point towards the fact that perhaps in the last quarter of the financial year, we will actually see a much better performance than in the previous quarter. Previous quarter itself, the third quarter, we were perhaps 0.1% on the positive side. And in this quarter, it could be much better. So the RBI's projection of 7.5% decline in the GDP could be overhauled, and we may come out with a lesser, smaller declining figure.
Absolutely. All right. So, Professor, let me bring you in now. The RBI in its State of the Economy report also talks about how there could possibly be room for policy action to support growth. So what kind of policy action can we expect?
First of all, I must mention that the State of the Economy is a very good write-up that they have given. And as my predecessor on the panel was saying, the factors that they have given are also very good. The economy is looking up. Now, if you look up that State of the Economy report in the bulletin, they do mention that the transmission of the repo interest rate has not been effectively taking place. And they have given the comparisons very well. So if you look at the comparison from March to the latest data, you find that the Reserve Bank reduced the repo rate by 150 basis point, 115 basis point, but no, the lending rates have not come down effectively. They have given a chart and they show that some of the lending rates have come down by just 67 basis point, and the largest that has come down by 94 basis point if you take different categories into account. So I think the first thing that they would probably be considering is that they would either make it more effective, that the lending rate should be brought down, or they will probably reduce the repo rate further. I am myself of the view that the repo rate can be reduced further, because if you look at inflation, the inflation figures, and again given in the same report, inflation figures were generally high, mainly because of food. Food inflation has been partly taken care of now, and it is subdued. So therefore, there is chance and there is a possibility that we could go in for further reduction and the repo rate. Now, February 5 is the next policy. February 1 is the budget. So depending on what the budget says, the Reserve Bank could consider that. On the liquidity, my own experience, and of course given in the report, has also been that the Reserve Bank has very well handled the liquidity part, especially the targeted long-term repo rates that they have handled. That repo has come out very well. So liquidity part is taken care, and I'm sure they'll continue to take care of that part. The other is the Reserve Bank has been very accommodative to the commercial banks and to the industry in terms of moratorium. So maybe the Reserve Bank is thinking, maybe if it is supported by evidence, extending that accommodative policy for commercial banks and credit to these sectors.
Right. All right. So, Mr. Shah, let me come back to you once again now. As far as investors are concerned, are they also seeing the same picture of this V-shaped recovery? And, are they expecting more of that in the next quarter?
Undoubtedly, investors are looking towards future with bullishness, apart from many factors which have been mentioned before. There is one big factor which investors are betting upon. If you look at gross capital formation of India, it fell from 34% in 2012 to 28% in 2020. This drop in gross capital formation was essentially driven by household, which is essentially you and me investing in real estate. It fell from 16% to 11%, down by about 5%, accounting for 83% drop in gross capital formation. And now stars are aligned for revival of real estate. Number one, affordability has increased. The affordability index of housing, which was around 50% in 2012, is now about 27%. Housing interest loans is available at 6.75%. With RERA, house buyer is protected. And more importantly, in this work from home environment, everyone is running one short room in their houses. So the demand is there, supply could be increased, affordability has increased, interest rates are low, and on top of it, many state governments are giving stamp duty concession. So investors are looking towards the future with positivity. There are many factors which could sustain this V-shaped recovery. However, obviously, investors will keep an eye on medical situation. Fortunately, with the grace of God, in India, things are under control. But if you look outside, be it UK, US, China, things seems to be deteriorating on COVID-19.
Mr. Shah, talking about this medical situation, a quick follow-up question there. The fact that India has done reasonably well, has done very well really in dealing with the pandemic at large, is that something that the foreign investors are looking at too, as far as India is concerned?
So in a very lighter way, I can say that the world is seeing two largest countries in a completely different color. One probably gave Wuhan virus to the world. At least they have been fairly non-transparent in handling of virus. On the other hand, India is providing vaccines to the world. Undoubtedly, India is being appreciated by foreign investors. But at the end of the day, in a serious manner, investors will invest in India as long as we provide growth opportunity, which is better than our peers. So while our perceptions will be good with the way we have managed COVID-19, we can't take away the responsibility of providing growth opportunity to investors.
Absolutely.
World is full of liquidity and negative to zero interest rates. They'll be happy to give money as long as we provide growth opportunity.
So, Mr. Dasgupta, let me come to you now. As far as the recovery is concerned, what are the sectors that we need to watch out for, and how do we continue to give this growth opportunity that Mr. Shah is talking about?
The areas which will show growth now would be e-commerce and digital technologies in its various facets. But there are areas which have been hit very badly and disproportionately at that, which includes the hospitality sector, tourism, entertainment, and a few other things. Now, these are the areas which will face a very difficult time, because many of them, will turn into NPAs as well. Despite the moratorium, once it is over, they will face a huge problem. So the government needs to, and mind you, these sectors are one of the largest employers taken together. Tourism, hospitality, the business, restaurants, which are standalone restaurants, all put together. So we will have to be mindful of that, and the government will need to come out with sectoral policies to ease out the pain for those sectors which have a large number of people employed in them, and which contribute substantially to the GDP, and which are in trouble. So that will be one of the priorities. The second thing is that the construction industry also is showing an uptick, as Mr. Nilesh Shah has mentioned, including housing. Now, the government has a very ambitious national infrastructure pipeline project, which has, I think, about more than 1 lakh crore for a 5-year period. Now, if we could front load the expenditure on the national infrastructure project pipeline and have large expenditure on roads, port development, railways, energy, etc., that would have a multiplier effect, and it would provide employment, it would provide consumer spending, and it could give a fillip to the industry in general.
Absolutely. Professor, so, looking ahead, where do you think the problem areas lie? What needs to be done to try and negate some of that?
Let me continue from the conversation which is going on. I also feel that, yes, to a great extent, we have been compensated by the medicine and the pharmaceutical industry. And that has brought us laurels. Of course, we are exporting the vaccine now to our neighboring countries, but that has also generated lots of income within the country. So that thing has to be appreciated. And to that extent, the hospitality sector and the tourism, which probably has suffered, would be compensated. So there's going to be some reskilling of the employment, and there's going to be some shift in the employment. Now, the areas which you say we need to fix up, according to me, are quite a few, and let me just mention some of them. The farm loans is in front of us. There is a possibility that there could be a slight setback, and I would say that the reforms should continue with gusto. There may be a setback in some areas of reforms, but reforms in labor laws, reforms in agriculture and farm laws, they're always difficult. So the government, which has picked up pace and is a hardcore reformist, should continue with the reforms. That is one thing. The other is, where are the other sectors where something can be done immediately? I think COVID is going to lead to two major problems. One is the mortality rate in MSMEs is certainly going to go up. And to handhold the MSMEs, the government will have to play a role, because MSMEs are really labor intensive and provide lots of employment after agriculture sector. Fortunately, agriculture is done well, and the monsoon and the weather is good, so the produce will be good, but MSMEs will need handholding. Related to this MSMEs is quite a bit of informal sector where the policymakers have thought through and had the hawker scheme, the mudra loans, that segment will have to be taken care of. The third, the non-banking finance companies are right now doing okay because liquidity has been provided by the Reserve Bank. But as liquidity moderation would take place, the non-banking finance companies, they interact the most with the MSMEs and the common man. They will have to be strengthened and handheld so that they continue to do the work that they are doing. Commercial banks are at a certain stage and the NBFCs are the intermediate stage. MFIs have started showing stress in a few places, especially Assam, and some of the MFIs, the microfinance institutions, which also provide funding, have also started recording little higher NPAs, but that would be expected. The last point I want to make is the government is doing very well with the vaccine and rolling out the plan very effectively. but this is going to take care of the physical self. The lockdown period, the unemployment, look at different segments of the society, the youth, the elderly. Also, the people who got unemployment locked up in a small room, look at the mental health of those people. So I think there are studies which show 18 months to 24 months after the pandemics, mental health issues precipitate and become very big. Social, there could be petty crimes and social issues could come up, psychological issues could come up, anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies can come up while the recovery is yet to take place. If you look at the patterns within the states, some states are recovering faster than the other. Therefore, the pattern of migration may have to change. And all these bring stress into the society as well as the mind. So I think that is one area which we need to focus upon.
Absolutely. All right, time to get closing comments now from all my panelists. We are just a few days away from the budget on February 1st, so I'd like to get some budget expectation reactions from all my panelists as we close the program. Starting first with you, Mr. Shah.
So I want a budget which is growth oriented. The finance minister should raise resources by monetizing government's assets rather than by raising taxes. The finance minister should also support needy sectors of economy like real estate, construction, hotel, tourism, travel, retailing, small and medium enterprises, and bottom of pyramid citizens who have been hit hard by COVID. And she should also maintain path of fiscal prudence. This sounds impossible and difficult, but if you think innovatively in raising resources, then this is achievable.
Mr. Das Gupta.
I think the government needs to have a positive outlook and needs to be more optimistic about spending rather than taking a very cautious approach and restricting spending, because that is going to be the key, which will determine how fast we are on the path to recovery. The V-shaped recovery, upward path, whether it is a slow slant or it is a steep curve, that is what will be determined by that. So that is one thing. The second point is that education and healthcare, these are two sectors which have hitherto been neglected, especially healthcare. And there the government spending needs to go up because it will affect a large number of people. It will also provide employment. So these are two sectors which, in addition to what has been mentioned by the other speakers, these two need special focus.
Right. And Professor, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Yes, I think I have made two suggestions already which are in public domain. One is the zero rate of interest on EWS and LIG housing for a limited period to be executed through the direct benefit transfer on registration of the house so that there is no misuse of resources. This would trigger the housing sector growth, which has backward forward linkages with 275 industries and is reasonably labor intensive. The other, the tourism sector is suffering the most. And I have suggested that to encourage religious tourism, which the investment has already taken place, and only if it increases will lead to higher use of airlines and the train services and taxes, you could experiment with LTC on pensioners. So with that, you would revive the economy and do in some pump priming. These are the two suggestions which I think will be able to contribute to reviving the economy. Thank you.
All right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the bull run at the street is likely to continue and investors clearly see and expect a V-shaped recovery. Talking about the sectors that we need to watch out for, we need to increase the spending as far as education and healthcare are concerned. The informal sector, MSMEs, NBFC, as the liquidation moderation takes place is something that we need to watch out for and where hand-holding is required. Real estate, hospitality and tourism too need to be given special attention. We need to think innovatively going forward, and that's how we'll see the V-shaped recovery really taking proper shape. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.